first act, coming to the stage, she's a researcher at the University of Washington. How about a big hand for Dunn, everybody?
So this is very weird. Hi. So I'm an academic, which means I have no social skills. So we're going to work through this together. So I'll just start at the beginning. Does that work out for everybody? Cool. So one of the things that was really cool for me when I got this job was that nobody ever tells you that when you become an adult, you can actually start working and researching on things that completely fascinate you, even if they don't fascinate anybody else. So I jumped at the opportunity when I finally started my PhD to appease my inner goth kid and study things like fear and death, even though I'm a consumer behavior specialist. And I just know that she would be super excited. She would be nodding solemnly in excitement about this situation right here. So I am going to tell you a little bit about my fear research, if that's okay with you. Goth kid, purple hair. So turns out when you want to study something, you have to do a lot of reading. And I figured I'd save you that and just sort of summarize the hundreds and hundreds of papers I read to come up with this idea. So it's fear. Fear is a basic emotion. And what does that mean? It means that regardless of what nationality you are, what language you speak, every person experiences the same thing. So you can walk into a different country where you don't speak the language and you see that face, you know exactly what that face means, right? Maybe they're holding pumpkin spice latte. It's a different type of basic. But so fear is this basic emotion. We all have it. Evolutionarily, fear is just put in place to make sure that we don't go around killing ourselves, right? So that we don't attack the bear that's standing right there, that we don't step on the snake, that we don't get into awkward social altercations because we're scared of things. Most people think of fear, they think about fight or flight, right? You get this high arousal, intense emotion. You're really uncertain about what's happening in the environment. And because of that, you need to decide, in this moment, do I want to fight the serial killer and be that final girl? Or do I want to run away from the serial killer, probably way slower than I should, tripping a lot, and maybe be that first girl that dies in the horror movie? So that's the fight or flight instinct. And it turns out that that's the sort of simple understanding of what fear is, because if researchers like to do things, we like to super complicate things. So basics for fear is that it's a negative emotion and it's a high arousal emotion. So it's trying to teach us to make a decision quickly that hopefully won't lead to our demise. More complex thought is that sometimes when we're faced with a situation, we need to cognitively appraise what's happening. So I'm having this experience physically, but I'm not sure what's causing it. And so I'm gonna look at the environment, I'm gonna say, okay, well, I'm not sure what's happening, and I feel like I have absolutely no control. I must be afraid, right? And so this is something called cognitive appraisal theory. So I'm getting really deep here for you guys. And so like, on a simple level, it's negative, it's high arousal. On a more complex level, fear is about high uncertainty, low control. And so we want to engage in things that allow us to regain certainty or regain control in some way. So that's fear. Seems less exciting when you break it down to those components. But I said, okay, now that I know a lot about fear, how have we seen fear in marketing, right? So how many of you have seen advertisements before? Yeah? How many of you have seen ads that say, you know, drinking's really bad, getting behind a car when you're drinking is really bad because everybody dies, right? Yeah. That's a fear appeal. And so in marketing, we do generally see most of the research coming out about what's the right amount of fear to get people to avoid behavior that's bad, right? So fear is this avoidance thing. I don't want you to kill yourself or other people, so maybe don't drink and drive. Or the new one is don't text and drive. There's some really cool fear appeals about that also. So in marketing, we generally see don't do it, it's bad, right? Avoid this behavior, live a little bit longer. Other research in marketing has gone back to this idea that fear is super uncertain. And because of that, we become incredibly risk averse when we're making decisions, right? So if I'm feeling afraid, I'm not gonna go out and gamble, right? I'm gonna make the safe choice because that allows me to have some certainty and a little bit more control over the situation. In all of these cases, when I was researching them, I was like, this is all about how bad fear is, right? Fear is so awful that we wanna use it to make sure that people don't do things. And because I'm a contrarian and I really enjoy underdog stories, I started up with this idea of, can we possibly have positive outcomes from negative emotions or negative experiences? So this started this idea of fear might not be a bad thing in some respects. So when might fear be okay? And that led me to think about coping, all right? So when we're scared, we wanna do something about it, fight or flight, right? But it turns out that humans are a little bit more complex than that. Humans like to be with people. I mean, how many people came alone tonight versus with other people? That's our general need to belong. Yes, this guy knows. That was my comedian joke. Anyway, so we want to be with people. We have this innate need to belong. And it turns out that when we're afraid, when we're uncertain and we have no control, it actually enhances our desire to be with other people. We want to share that experience. We want to go through that experience with another person. So maybe the fear is a little bit less. Maybe the uncertainty is a little less. Maybe at least I know that if I'm going to die, you're going down with me. And that's okay. Right? So humans cope with fear by seeking out other people. We call it this desire for affiliation. Okay, so now I've got my pieces coming together. Fear leads to desire for affiliation. How can I possibly, as a marketer, use this desire for affiliation in a way that benefits marketers? Right? That's what we're all in it for. And so luckily, there's this thing called brands. Yeah? Everybody has a brand that they love, probably. Brands at their very basic level just tell you what the manufacturer of that product is, what they manufacture, whether it's gonna be consistent quality all the time. But because we know that as marketers and psychologists, we know that people love other people, brands also have personalities, right? We build up this concept of a personality. We anthropomorphize brands because we know that that makes brands more attainable for consumers, right? So I want to be with this brand. It makes sense to me because it has these human-like traits. So now we're at this big wow moment for myself, which that's probably not as wow as it should be. It's for myself. If people cope with fear through affiliation, and brands have these human-like characteristics, could it be possible that in the absence of another person being present during a fear experience, that we might see brands supplementing that relationship that we need? And so that was my big research question. So can brands take the place of people in these fear experiences? What it really led to was, can fear enhance emotional attachment to a brand? And so what I'd like to do with however much time I have left is walk you through a couple of studies about whether I tested that experience and whether that's true, and sort of that takeaways from that. So I did what I love to do, which is I brought undergrad students into a lab, and I said, you have to do this for 5% course credit. And so they came in, stuck for an hour of their time, in which I told them that you're gonna go through multiple different studies. And the first one was a movie experience study, and then a later one will be a brand experience study. And so participants were like, you're gonna be randomly assigned to watch a number of different movie genres, just to warn them that maybe they're gonna have a scary movie, which I'm the weird one, because I love scary movies. Apparently most undergrad students don't. So I had to put them in their own separate room with the lights down and the laptop volume very high so that they couldn't hide from the scary. She's ready. Yeah, so they were randomly assigned. So they either watched horror movies, or they watched comedies, or they watched dramas or action movies. And then I also said, the later study is this brand experience study, so I'm just going to put this brand in the room with you so that I don't have to come in every single time and move you on to the next study. Feel free to try it if you want. You don't have to. It's just sitting there. The marketing part of me said, it's got to be an unknown brand, because the cool thing for a marketing academic is that brand attachment takes time. You have to know the brand. You have to have experience with the brand in order to have loyalty to it. And so I wanted to say, can fear actually facilitate the creation of this brand attachment to a brand you've never seen before? And so this brand they'd never seen before was in the room with them. After the scary movies, they rated the movies, and then they rated the brand. How much do you like this brand on some attitude scales, and then an emotional attachment scale. So do you feel love, connection, bonded, attached to this brand? And what I found was, yay, fear led to higher emotional attachment to a brand, which is super surprising because they'd never seen this brand before. So in the sadness and the happiness and the exciting conditions, it was very low. It was about 1. In fear, it was about a 3, statistically significant. And that was fascinating. I was like, cool, this actually worked. And the reason it worked was because people in the fear condition actually thought that the brand had shared that experience with them, whereas the other emotion conditions, they didn't feel that the brand had been there for them. So we have this, which is a weird thing to say. Imagine asking a student that question, do you feel like the brand shared this experience with you? Yes. So that was the first step. I was like, cool, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened, because it's my first time out the gate and it actually works. Never happens. And so I was like, well, what's the next step? Is it because maybe in the fear condition they were so nervous they just opened the drink and drank it, which means that they actually had experience with the product that led to this higher attachment? I was like, well, I'm going to test it. And so then in the next study, they had to be randomly assigned to either taste the product, so I called that the forced consumption condition, touch the product, so I said, here's this brand, feel free to pick it up, but don't try it. Or this is just in the room, don't touch it. It's there. Don't touch it. Don't drink it. You can look at it if you want, but it's there. And again, fear, regardless of whether they touched it or they drank it or they just looked at it, led to this higher emotional brand attachment than the other emotional conditions. So it didn't matter if they had experience with it. It was still there for them. Weird. And then I said, okay, so what's even weirder now? It's like, well, maybe it's just that it's a physical thing that's in the room with them. Maybe a brand has nothing to do with it, right? And that is a very scary question for me, because my whole hypothesis hinged on the fact that brands have human traits. We supplement relationships with these brands because they're human. And so the next one was, I'm gonna have a brand, I'm gonna have a product. So it's the exact same product, but one has a brand logo on it, one doesn't. And again, yay. Only in the conditions where it had a brand logo did fear lead to this higher emotional brand attachment. If it was just a product, you didn't see it. You didn't see that they felt like it shared the experience with them. You didn't see this higher emotional connection. So that was super exciting, because nothing ever works every single time you try it. Yay, academics. And so the takeaway for me, I mean, most of the time when I talk about this, I have marketers going like, well, what can companies do with this? And I say, hand out stress balls before haunted houses. But really, I didn't care about that. Because for me, what was fascinating, and what continues to be fascinating from a consumer behavior perspective, is that people are incredibly bizarre, right? You expect them to be logical, and then they're just not, which at this point should be the norm, but we still get really excited when humans continue to be weird. And so humans are so bizarre that we are willing, and we have this such innate need for a relationship, that we're willing to supplement a relationship that we don't have with a brand because it has some characteristics that we might like. So think about that next time you're watching a horror movie. and you're holding something. And then you go, wow, I really love Coke more than I thought I did. Thank you.